Do you know him? Do you know him? The other day I was watching a television show set in the 1500s in England, at a time when it seems it was as easy to lose your head as it is to turn it. And someone, a young woman in great trouble, was being interrogated. And the person asking her the questions, a bishop of all people, was trying to give her an out, trying to lead her into telling a little white lie, trying to save her life. And she wouldn't take the hint. She wouldn't take the hint, well, not because she was virtuous, but she really just wasn't that bright. She couldn't see the open door she was being invited to flee through. And I said out loud, as she gave an answer guaranteeing her death, well, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. And even as the words came out of my mouth, I felt a little sadness, because this is what we've become. Do you know him? Do you? We have become a society, a world that values many things above truth. Power, riches, immediate gratification, survival. Truth can become an easy victim to all of these. Truth is great as long as it doesn't get in the way of what we want, as long as it doesn't put us somewhere where we are afraid. Do you know him? Do you? I watched my show. I watched the character fail to take the road to life and safety, and I said, that was a mistake. And later I realized, as I read this lesson, that I do know him. I do indeed. I know Peter. For while perhaps in modern times there are fewer of us who will die for truth, much less be inconvenienced by it, the fear of death has been guiding the answers of the tongue since we were running around in deerskin. And usually the person we know, the person we are, is Peter. We talk a good game before the game. We profess that we will stand true. We take the sacred oath. We sing the fight song loud and clear. But when the moment of truth for the truth arrives, all that stuff gets hard to remember. We come up with excuses. We sidestep the question. We assure ourselves, it's okay, we'll make up for it later. And we become Peter. And while there is little chance that we will ever be put into the situation Peter found himself in, a chance that essentially said, confess Jesus and maybe die, or deny and live, denying truth usually results in some kind of death. You see, death is not always the big death, and it's not always immediate. That's why the Lutheran understanding of the commandment includes an understanding, for example, that we can kill a person's feelings or reputation or happiness. It reminds us that when we are dishonest, the suffering we cause is always a kind of death. So when we deny environmental truth and watch the planet die, when we deny that racism has become institutionalized in this land and watch the path forward for brothers and sisters shut off by lack of opportunity, when we deny that virtue should be the mark of our dealings and be a force in our public and private life, when we deny logic, when someone inserts money or power into the middle of our reasoning, when we deny friendship for the opportunity to share a joke with or become more popular with others, When we refuse to listen because listening will make us afraid, then we deny it. And we do in turn know him. We know Peter. Of course, there are two interrogations happening in this lesson, aren't there? We watch Jesus speaking truth to questions, truth to insinuations and lies. We watch Jesus bravely refuse to give up his dignity, position, conscience. We watch this other interrogation, and I would wager that even if we didn't know the end of the story, we would know that this man is not going to give in to death. He would not sacrifice truth to avoid death, no matter who held the door open for him, a door that could be opened with one little white lie. We watch this man who is brave enough to face torture and death. And we thank God for him, because even as we might not be able to understand him as intimately as we can understand his fallen disciple, we still know him. And we know he is for us. This Jesus is truth, and he carries for us a promise that despite our failures, our inability to live truth the way he lived truth, his grace will be sufficient for us, always there for us. His grace will always cradle us in the arms of God's love. A few years ago, members of the senior high youth group and I were having a discussion. We were talking about the book She Said Yes. The book, of course, is about a young woman who, it said, confessed her faith in God, and this confession led to her killing in the midst of the Columbine shootings. The tragedy of this young woman's death and the death of those who died in that shooting is a horrible fact, even as the authenticity of the story in this book has come into question. But we didn't know this back then, and we were talking about the book. And I confess, I said to those senior high kids, those kids I take as my own kids, those kids that I love, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this, lie your butt off. Lie your butt off. Say anything you can say to stay alive. And when you stand before God, you say, Pastor Mike told me to say that. And that Pastor Mike will take the punishment. I'm sorry, I still feel that way. I think Jesus might feel that way. But if not, I'm willing to take the hit to keep my kids alive, and I'd wager a lot of you would too. Giving the life of a kid to a mad person, it's just not worth it. And if that means the cock crows as I say it, so be it, I will take the hit. Hey, Jesus took the hit for me, right? But we do have to draw some lines. There has to become a time when truth matters. And where that line falls, well, it's a question we all have to answer in our lives. Do you know him? Yes. We know Peter. Do you know him? Yes. We know our Savior. And we want to know him better. And we want to live his truth. And we want to get to that place with him where truth matters maybe even more than our lives. Because a life lived well in the end is the life lived in truth.